Welcome.
Are we on now?
Yes,
All
we're
right.
recording now.
There's at least two major static analysis tools I know of. The first one I ever used was Psalm by Vimeo, and then PHPStan, the one we're talking about tonight. I have grown to prefer PHPStan. It feels a little easier, slightly easier to work with, in my opinion, a little, I don't know, kind of guides you better, gives you better suggestions. I wouldn't say either is really better than the other, probably, in the end, probably more preference than anything.
What's nice is you can actually use both of them
True,
if you
yeah.
really want to.
True, you can use both. They're not mutually exclusive. But you can read a lot more about it if you want at phpstan.org. But tonight I'm just gonna grab a project of mine, Splat, that was using Psalm, and I've already stripped out Psalm from it. And we're just gonna implement PHPStan just to show you what that's like to get it set up and use it. Again, being that I didn't test this ahead of time, being that I was using Psalm, we may not even get any errors. So let's see. So if
First get up to level 9.
Right.
See what happens.
So I've got my project and I'm already in the directory for it, and it's installing PHPStan is as easy as using Composer to require it. Composer require dev. We're only going to be running this locally in a dev. You don't need this in production. And I believe it's just PHPStan, right?
Yeah, missed a P.
My way. This
Wow.
Let's go away.
Stand.
Fans.
And that will give us the library itself, and that includes a binary file, PHPStan, here that we can execute against our code. Just by including it, you can just go ahead and run it from the command line, and without any additional configuration. Call PHPStan, and we call analyze. And then let me remember, let's see, documentation, getting started. We can then call analyze against our folders that we watch. So I believe I have a source and a test folder here. That should get us started. Okay, so
No errors.
yeah, default no errors. Again, I thought this might be the problem, but as you can see, it says you can pass higher rule levels through the level option. And there's 9 levels.
And default it's a 0.
Yes, exactly. Default's to 0. And with ever increasing, as you increase those levels, you get more and more different checks, static analysis checks. So 0 is just a few basic checks. Level 1 will add a couple additional checks to it, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way to 9. So let's just try level, I don't know, 3. I guess, nope, okay. 4. Okay, we're just gonna go all the way up to 9. See, make sure, yeah, just see if we have any. Okay. So we do have some. So we do get some errors by running it at 9. I think you can also say max, which will just default to whatever the current max is, because recently they did up it from 8 to 9. So if you use max, they'll always give you the highest. Anyway, once you've run it, you'll get this output that'll show you your errors. So we can just go and review those one at a time. So if we take a look at the source glob file on line 90, there's the method globs filter has parameter array with no value type specified in iterable type array. Okay. Getting right into the weird ones, the not so straightforward ones. Let me, yeah, all right, let's go there. Source globs. Let's go to our source glob file in line 90. On line 90, parameter array, so it's our array parameter here, with no value specified in its iterable type array. I believe what that means is at the higher levels of PHPStan, when you pass around arrays, it actually wants to know what the array contains within the array. Like an array in PHP doesn't tell you what inner items are. For example, you get an array of strings. You have an associative array of objects. For like, if a key, sometimes you can have a integer index or you can have a string index. Again, an array is very loose in what it means to be an array.
Doesn't even have to be homogeneous. Be a whole bunch of random different things.
True, that's true. It doesn't have to be, yeah, you could have some things in the array. In most cases, your arrays are generally going to be of one type.
We hope.
Hopefully. But so what this area is saying is we know this is an array, but it doesn't tell us what's within the array. So I have to remember.
We can only do that with
doing.
a doc. We can only do that with a doc block, right? Like a PHP
Right.
language itself doesn't support it.
Yes. So in exactly, PHP does not have a native way of type hinting the contents of an array. But what you can do in your doc block is we can add an annotation that will tell PHP will read the annotation and be able to then tell or infer what it is from that. So we're going to say param array, and then you have two options when specifying array types. You can either say, I think it's an array of strings. So this can say it's an array containing only strings. Alternatively, you can give it the
Square brackets.
curly brackets and give it. You can say like it's indexed by integers and then strings. So this would look an array like that would be saying like it's an array like 1 something 2 something.
And then, yeah, he said a third way too.
Yeah,
What's it?
you just do
String
string with
square
square
brackets.
brackets.
Oh yeah, that's true. I didn't even think of that. We can use the native type string and then square brackets to say this is an array of strings.
You could. There's also like an array shape thing that you can use too, right?
That's
That's
what's
the-
my second one.
Oh, okay.
And you can say
But I
like,
mean, like, I feel like I actually type pound array shape. It's like a PHP storm.
It's in our.
JetBrains like
Pure
pure
annotation.
annotation thing.
oh,
Yeah,
Yeah.
PHPStan understands those.
okay.
Oh,
yeah.
You know what? I think
Those are
that
not-
curly syntax might not be right.
It's the other way? Is it?
It's I think if you're saying
commas.
that's gonna say you have a key and an int, that's a string. That's the array shape syntax.
Yeah,
So
it's
if you
the
want to
same-
do that, you need to do the caret or the angle brackets, int, comma, string.
So
let me hold on here. Let me bring up the documentation.
I think
there's a bunch of
Yeah.
different options to cover all the various cases.
I go to this page probably
know.
more often than
PHPStan
Well,
array shape.
it's probably more often than the PHP manual lately, it feels like.
So here's where, yeah, they have a whole page specifically talking about their types, but if you scroll down, so you have general arrays, that's what we've been talking about. Oh yeah, okay, and it's type, you're right, that's what that is. So this will specify your key and your index, or your index and your value.
I didn't even know you could say non-empty.
Yeah, that's weird.
Oh yeah, that's very good.
Kind of verbose.
Yeah, sure.
Let's scroll down to.
Always at least one thing.
Where the heck is it? Array shapes, here we go.
Yeah, so this is for.
Yeah, this is for those less straightforward arrays where it's like a mix of things. So this, like we can see here, we have an array with key foo that expects an int value or key bar and extends a string, expect a string value. And then this is also what would allow us to do like weird shapes and stuff like, or what do you call it? Non-modulus.
Yeah, this is, when you have a random property bag.
Yeah.
Sort of array definition, this lets you define it.
Or I've seen this useful, or I've used this one is when, I'm trying to remember, it was like, there's a library that it was like an API library. And so like the API took in its parameters as just an array.
Yeah.
And so you could type in all the properties of the array or
Yeah.
there, something like that.
Like the AWS API.
Anyway, yeah. So let's get back to fixing this problem. So this, I'm gonna go ahead and use our string and that is array. So this annotation here will tell us that we have a parameter called array that accepts an array of strings. I'm pretty sure that's what this is, filter array of strings, yeah. So what we can do then is if we rerun this, we should see one less error here, or maybe two, because I think these are both referring to the same thing. So we should see line 90 go away when we rerun this.
No.
Okay.
You moved it.
We got one
Oh, the
to go
return
away.
type, it's the exact same thing again, I guess, right?
Yep, return array, so now we also have to which specify return, we need to drag and spell.
We're gonna,
We'll run again, and that one should be gone.
This is the thing I see the most. It had types too.
Yeah.
It's like, this is the thing, because there's no native PHP. I never do this until PHPStan tells me I forgot to do it.
Exactly. Yeah, usually in any code I've been writing anymore, I don't put the dot block like at all.
Right, yeah.
No dot block.
Yeah.
And then only when it complains to you, that's that.
Like, I feel like I have a bunch of stuff. It's just like a mini dot block with just a return in it.
Before we go and fix all of these issues, I'm gonna, instead of having to pass all of this info into your command prompt every time, or command line arguments every time, we can actually define a configuration for PHPStan that will read and take in the values from when you're running it. So go back, let's go look at that real quick, just basic one.
Everybody's favorite format.
Neon, yeah, not quite YAML.
Wait, what's the point? It's just a little different than the other random formats I have to know.
And now there are 15 standards.
So what you can
Total
do,
for life. Google towel.
what's it called, PHP, all right, so what we can do is we can include a PHPStan config file in our directory, and as you say, it says we can call it one of many names, but generally what you're gonna do is you're gonna have one that you, a config file that you commit to the repository and distribute with the repository, so everybody on your team that's working on this project can check it out and have the same file, and that's gonna be our PHPStan neon.dist file. So we're gonna go ahead and just create phpstan.neon.dist.
why dist? What's,
It
what do you need
indicates,
a distribution copy? Like what?
so there's a precedence to which one, or there's an order to which files take precedence for one thing.
Oh,
Dist indicates this is the one being distributed with the project.
got it. So if you have a second one, it'll.
So yeah, so
override
if you see here, here's the resolution priority. If the config file is provided from a command line option, it'll be used, overriding everything else. If you want to have a local, like if you want to override the distributed one that comes with the project, you can use just phpstan.neon and that'll override anything or it'll use that one over the other ones. And then so that one could be like ignored, and then everybody, if they wanted to have, for whatever reason, individual configurations, they can do that. Generally, the project wide one is good enough, I think.
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever had a case for
Yeah.
individual ones.
Definitely had a case for dist versus not dist for PHP unit, but I don't think I've ever done it with PHPStan before.
Like I want an extra pane, I'm cranking mine to a 9.
Yeah, yes, totally. Yeah, you could do that. If you want to always be, if you want to get all of the warnings, then go for it.
And then you get ignore the.
I mean, that's actually, yeah.
Yes,
exactly.
you can ignore your own.
It's actually not a bad idea, because you might have a, let's say, theoretically, a company-wide standard of level 7 or something.
Yeah,
But you're like, but I still want my code to be level 9 because I like coding at level 9. So,
Right.
Yeah.
that's perfect. That's a good idea.
Yeah, you're just gonna be fixing other terminals.
Yeah, the
There's a way around that I was gonna let Chris cover.
But I didn't hear.
If you introduce this into a legacy code base, or if you do the company wide, send in what you wanna run on yours at 9, there's a way to ignore everyone else's fixes that are running at 8 or 9.
I was gonna get to that, yes.
Yeah, so I was waiting.
But anyways, let's go ahead and create our config file. We'll just, this is the, so you create the phpstan neon.dist, and at a minimum, we have to have we give it a parameters heading. Yeah, we got a mix of spaces. Whatever.
Spaces.
Yeah, format that cares, I hate.
What's that?
Any format that cares about the difference between mixed
Yes.
and spaces, I hate that
Yeah, I
format.
agree. But we were running at level 9, or
I
again, we can call this
usually
max.
Code with show white space on, so it bothers me when they're not the same.
I do it on
I
highlight.
do. I actually really like.
You have to be in the minority.
Probably. I do.
I like doing it on highlight,
Yeah.
but not like regularly. But anyway,
Wow.
so
I like to see it.
I just
What, the punishment?
Details matter,
Well,
details.
the Storm's gonna auto format it for me when I hit the commit button anyway, so like, then what I commit's not even necessarily gonna go into the repo.
Legacy code bases where you don't want your div to be huge.
Yeah, right.
Right, so we've created our config file and we've given it the parameters reading. So a list of our paths, as you can see, source and test, SRT, and then our level max. So from now on, we can just run PHPStan analyze, and it will, as you see, right there, it says note using configuration file from that file. So it's gonna pull in those parameters and use those there. And even shorthand, you can even just say PHPStan if all you're doing is running analyze. That's all you have to do, just run PHPStan and it'll run. So now, let's say, this is a very small project of mine that was already had some static analysis, so we have very few errors. So if I were actually implementing this, I would go through and fix these errors and then commit that all to Git. However, for those of us working with legacy applications or just long running, even not legacy, just long running applications that haven't had any PHP or static analysis applied to them yet, there's a good chance you're going to come back with hundreds of errors.
The project's been going on for more than a month with more than one person.
Yeah, exactly. For every person, for every month, multiply by 10 and yeah.
We're gonna just change your standard over time?
Yeah, right,
You were at 3 and now you're gonna jump to 5 or 9.
correct. So what you can do then is in those cases where you're just like, I have too many errors currently, there's no way I'm going to be able to fix all these in one go to like commit to the project and have it in one go. Problem is then if anybody else were to run it,
400 file puller points.
so the problem with that is that if you're, what you don't want is just noise, this just becomes noise is the problem. And if you have all this noise of all these errors, you're not going to be able to see new ones that pop up. And two, they'll just become ignored at a point and you're not even going to use the tool.
Oh, those are just the PHPStan errors, you can
Yeah.
ignore those.
Right. It's just the kooky old uncle, nobody pays
You can't
attention.
break your CI build.
Yeah, so that's one of the powers of PHP, of static analysis, is you want to be able to add this to your build process or your CI process to get warnings when errors happen. If you have hundreds of them there though, you're not gonna be able to pass CI, you're not gonna be able to commit or merge it in or whatever you do. So what we can do is we can generate what's called a baseline file, which will take that list of errors, throw it into a special file it knows and has a special format for it, and say, these errors already existed, we don't need to show them again. And I'm going to show you, so it's relatively easy to do that. Once you have your PHPStan set up, you can, at just this baseline where we're at now, we can call PHPStan analyze, and pass generate baseline. And this will tell us to generate a baseline with 3 errors. And that's going to create this PHPStan baseline.neon file here. And as you can see, it says parameters, ignore errors. It gives us it puts in the error that it ignored, how many times it happened, and what file. So if we run PHPStan again now, though, it's not going to actually do anything for us. We still have the errors. So what we then have to do is, I believe it's called includes. I think that's what it was. And then we pass it the name of that file, PHPStan baseline.neon. And this is going to tell it to include that file in our configuration. So now if we run PHPStan analyze, it says there are no errors. And really there are errors. It just already knew about the existing ones.
There are many new ones.
Yes, there are no new ones. Is there a way, does anybody know, is there a parameter to tell us all of them, like ignore the baseline if we just wanted to see them? I'm curious.
Because it seems like it's just a configuration file, so like, I'm thinking there's a lot empty baseline.
That's good. Yeah. So I mean, if you ever really wanted to go and see, you could always just comment it out,
Yeah.
and then
I mean, you should be trying to, right? Like you should be coming in and out and trying to like knock off 5 or 10 here and there,
Yeah.
like I assume.
if you've got the time and the resources to do so, absolutely. But sometimes you don't have time to deal with the backlog of errors.
Right.
But what we can do is once we have this, so let's say we've we've implemented PHPStan, we've generated the baseline, and ignored all our previous errors. So again, we're back to green. But then now I'm gonna write some new code, or change some old code or something. Let's say, trying to think of
You
something.
can just unfix that filter.
Just remove the return
Yeah.
type. Yeah.
Remove the return
Or the
type.
one you use.
Yeah, fix
add-
unfix your filter method.
Oh yeah, okay, that's a good one. So the one that we did fix.
190.
So let's just say we don't have that there. Like we made some changes to our code, or we added new code. Now we go ahead and analyze, and it says, hey, look, you actually just introduced an error into your code. Let's go ahead and fix it. But it didn't give us all those old ones. So again, keeping the noise out of things, but letting us, any new code we write is now going to be held up to the new standard without holding the sins of our father, something like that. You know? Exactly. And then yes, and then you can go through and go, okay, I got these errors, now I guess I gotta go fix those before I commit whatever. And we're back to normal. And then, okay, now here, and then let's just take that one step further with the baseline file. So we did have that same error, or I think it was the same error in our reject method. So we're gonna go look at that real quick. So let's say, let me do this real quick. I'm just gonna commit some of this stuff real quick. PHPStan baseline. Yeah, okay, let's just say. We've added PHPStan. So now let's say we do notice a problem that it already existed in our baseline, but maybe we didn't know that. But let's say we want to go ahead and fix that anyways. We're gonna do, I think it's the same thing as the other one, string array, and return array or string. So we've just so we've updated some code now and fixed an error that wasn't our baseline. Running PHPStan won't, I don't think it tells us anything different. Oh yeah, so here it says that we have an ignored error pattern. Like we have an error in our ignores that no longer exists. It was not matched.
So it's gonna force you to clean it up. You have to rerun the baseline now.
Right, so you can rerun the baseline to clean it up, or there is a configuration option.
Yeah, it kind of sucks. It's gonna fail the pipeline now that because you got to go back and clean up somebody else's, like clean up that.
Right.
Like it just kind of seems unnecessary, but
Well, lets you be accountable. If there's a config setting that turns it off, then that's.
Right.
Right, but the way that it tracks errors, it's not like it says you had an error in this line number.
Mhm.
It says you had this number of errors in that file. So if you're ignoring them and then you add a new one in, it would be ignored by that baseline. So really the only safe thing to do is as you fix things to keep regenerating the baseline.
Correct. You shouldn't do this, but there is the option to, yeah, I agree. You shouldn't do it. There is an option though to ignore ignore
ignored.
errors that were ignored that no longer exist.
Is that the
Your
dog
dog.
parameter?
I don't remember. Actually, I can find that.
Dash dash ignore dash blah 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 dash ignore dash.
How about you don't think of it?
Report unmatched ignored errors.
Oh wow, that is pretty long.
Yeah, just under practice real quick, we can. So if we had that, we should no longer get it. So again, so the screen, because again, there are no new errors, there's now an ignored one that doesn't apply, but regardless. So anyway, what we should be doing, that's where I was getting at. We have one that was ignored that doesn't exist anymore. Again, we just regenerate the baseline.
Yes, you have to be careful because it could say found 3 errors, 2 are ignored ones, but the third one's like
Yeah.
actually a thing, and then you're just like, oh, let's regenerate the baseline, and
Yes.
now you've added one more.
So you should, my rule is to never generate a new baseline file unless you have 0 actual errors. Like if you have actual errors here, don't regenerate your baseline at that time. You should fix the actual errors, and then only once the remaining errors it gives you are ignored errors or like actual problems that aren't going to be fixed, should you then generate a baseline. So anyways, we just generated a baseline. It's regenerated the baseline. And you can see that it went ahead and removed those errors from the baseline, and we can update it.
That's the nice thing too, is that format is readable. It's gonna show up in your commits, diffs. So if you have a bunch of other stuff in there, it's pretty easy for whoever's doing your code review to be like, oh, you did that wrong.
And we call them stenoyances.
Annoyances.
Okay, I call them stenoyances.
All right, just lost my train of thought. Where were we going? Not here.
Yes, it is.
Oh yes, so sometimes you'll run into a problem where you know you're gonna have a problem with some line of code, like it's gonna give you an error, and maybe you can't fix it for some technical problem. Maybe it's like the error it's giving you is actually based on a problem in a library you've included, and it's complaining about that, or it's just too complex of an issue to deal with right now. You just need to get this out the door, and for whatever reason, that's not necessarily a good reason, but
Or there's some complex stuff,
Mhm.
like, let's say
Including
your
files.
you're initializing read-only properties in a dynamic constructor. And since the dynamic static analysis will never be able to figure out the right thing, whether you're doing it or not.
right. So sometimes you're just gonna have an issue with a line or two of code that you're not gonna fix for one reason or another. I'm not gonna get, who knows? You got your reasons. You can always give those an annotation, specific annotation that will instruct PHPStan to just ignore that line any errors on it.
Hi, Golden.
So I don't have it, actually, let's see, let me do, I know what I think. Let's just kill the baseline for a second. There's at least one more error in here, right? In pattern on line 26, let's see what we got here. Here we go. Type has no value type specified in interval. So I've added an extension to VS Code that will expose PHPStan errors in my IDE while I'm working. PHP Storm has the same. It's very powerful. It lets you not have to constantly go back to the console and run it and see what's going on. You get it live, squiggles and messages, and really nice. I encourage you to do that if you do implement static analysis. But anyways, has no value type specified. So this is the same error, just another one. But let's say it was a real big problem and we're never gonna fix this, or at least not in the near future. So you can tell PHPStan to ignore it by giving PHPStan ignore line. And it's that there's this one for ignore line, will ignore that specific line. And there's also the
Is it current line?
PHPStan ignore next line, I believe, is what it is. Either one of these will work. But so if we do that and run PHPStan, we have the tools, it says, just don't worry about that one.
Yeah.
Keep it on the road. Who cares? I don't encourage this.
It's good, I promise.
Yeah, but sometimes there are extenuating circumstances that make this required every now and then.
Yeah, like we have some code that like loads in a WP config file to load the constants out of it. But those files aren't in the project, so there's no way to know what they are.
Yeah.
So it's just like, well, static analysis.
Dynamic increase.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. There are some other ways of solving issues when you have problems with code that you can't really code from. And I don't want to get into this too much, but there's something called the concept of stub files, where you can basically create a new file and add like that kind of represents another class outside of your project's control. This goes back to that, like a library. I included a library. Their typing is bad, so it's causing static analysis errors. But like in those cases, you can quote stub their files. So like you can create a file that says this is that a class, like representing the class of that other file, and then add doc blocks to it to give it proper types and stuff that PHPStan will do. I've had a few successes with that. Sometimes it's more trouble than it's
I
worth.
guess it's similar to like TypeScript types files, right?
I'm not familiar, but yeah.
And there's definitely projects out there that provide them for popular and problematic libraries.
Yeah.
It's good to know.
For example, WordPress.
But yeah, cool. There you go.
And some PHP extensions have some issues.
You could be someone else's hero by creating a project that's just a PHPStan stub file. You create another project.
These are integers, I think. So this one is a little weirder, but I think this one is actually going to be int, comma, mixed, I believe, in this case. That should solve that error.
You're missing $1 for your cache. Very late. And
Go here.
yeah,
It doesn't want it.
Take it.
What is that? It just popped up a new one after it.
Well, it's because you're pulling something out of the cache, so it's tracking that type. So if you pull something out of the cache, then
Now it knows the type and it realizes
that you're
so-
doing something on sick.
So that's a good, yeah. So what he said here is before this, all it knew is this is an array. It didn't know what was in the array. So when we actually are working with the array down in the file, further down in the code, PHPStan doesn't know what's in it. Once we've added a type here, it's actually, this might indicate to me that I gave it the wrong type. It says,
You use like a string function that requires you to pass it a string, but now it could actually only pass a mix.
I think it's grayed out because you don't actually need to put int since it's assumed.
no, that's just the, for whatever reason, VS Code, if I actually get rid of this space, it's,
Oh, weird. Okay.
I don't know why, it's just the coloring of the way it's formatted.
It doesn't actually understand that syntax.
Right.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
so.
I mean, it's right. On 63, you say that function returns a string, right? And
Yeah.
you're returning directly
So
from
that
the
either
cache.
needs to not be mixed or.
You need to return
you
mixed
to
from
assert-
that other
It's
guy.
storing a string. I just gave it the wrong template. So it's actually, yeah, that's correcting me and saying according to what you gave us, so this is the importance,
Your implementation has only put strings in there.
correct.
Yeah.
So that, yeah. But what that did is it said that what it told me is, no, sorry, let me step back. There's an important aspect to this in that when you do type in things, you need to give them specific correct type hints for the static analysis engine to be able to then correctly infer that and understand what's happening in the code further down. If you give it that information, you're going to get more errors, you're going to get more problems, and it's not going to actually solve anything.
Yeah, you don't really want to use the mixed type a lot,
Right.
but if you're dealing with, say, JSON decode,
So at this point, I think, I've pretty much solved all the issues in this one.
Yeah, you did.
But then again, this was a small project, already had static analysis. Baseline connect.
Wow.
So-
Baseline, congratulations.
Yeah, at this point, we can honestly get rid of our baseline,
I think that must be what the allow empty baseline
probably.
configuration is for.
Yeah,
You have to keep removing it from
I
version.
could do that. And like, yes, you could add a parameter to allow the baseline to be empty, so that way if you ever do get to 0, you don't have to remove the file, remove it from Git, and then re-add it, and re-add the config, yeah.
I don't actually commit, for one of our projects at work, I don't have us commit the baseline. Because I run it locally and we have our set of like 0 or 1. And then when I write code, I let mine rip my code apart. And if I write anything or someone else writes some new code, then I'll let it rip theirs apart. Then everyone's just in detail with the PRs. Now I'm just using the tools.
So that's, you should, that goes back to what he was saying, is we can use the override file to run it locally at a higher level. But commit the regular and baseline of the 0 and 1 level there, but then you can run it at a higher level. But then also, I would encourage you to add that to your CI process. So that way all the feedback from it comes from the CI process instead.
So if you do that, you'd have to go over to master, run the baseline at 9, then switch to your branch and rerun it at 9. Because you can't, if you run the baseline on your own branch, you've already included all of your own problems, right?
So what you should do is you should take master, branch master, add PHPStan, add it at the add a config file at the level you want, fix any errors you want to fix, generate a baseline there, commit it, and make that one PR that's saying this is introducing PHPStan at this level, and we've generated a baseline. From then on, anytime it runs, it'll run against using that baseline. So any new errors at that level will show up. And again, if you want to run at a higher level, those will also show up without showing all those lower level ones. Is there anybody else familiar with PHPStan or anything else to add at this point? Like,
Well, really, the only other big problem that you run into is, say, if you're using dependency injection or something like that, that there's not already a PHPStan plugin for. You're either gonna be adding a lot of var annotations every time you use your dependency injection container, or you're gonna have to write your own plugin to have that happen automatically.
are you speaking from experience? Is there a specific container you're talking about here?
Yeah, I mean, the use our own isn't supported out of the box, but
Anytime you're
there's lots of.
service location versus dependency injection, you write an annotation,
Right.
because it's just, container get. What?
Yeah, but you can run on that too, like, let's say you did pre-PHP 8.1 immutable objects. Well, you're most likely gonna be using magic methods, and so you're gonna either have to put a bunch of doc blocks everywhere, or you could write a plugin and start having to put those doc blocks on everything. Or you could just switch to 8.1 and be able to do it for reals.
You only covered generating the baseline, you didn't cover actually manually adding anything to the baseline. Because ultimately, it's just, you can manually add certain things. If you're always seeing this one error, you can have a regex, so ignore that error.
Correct. You can, yeah, I think I've got.
You can ignore like full files, like our like
Yeah, you do files.
PHP adapter. I'm just like, I'm not dealing with this because
Right, or if you have a pattern that always is gonna keep happening and you just decided it's fine, you can just add in a regex version of that pattern, anything under a namespace.
So this is my current work project, but we have a number of them in here that are, yeah, exactly. These are just errors that we don't care to report ever. So we've added a regex that picks them up. Another good one is actually filtering so again, we don't get too deep into this, but there's a concept of a checked exception versus a not checked exception in PHPStan. And what that means is a checked exception is an exception, if it's thrown, should be handled or annotated at the top level of the method it's thrown to then be handled up a higher level. An unchecked exception is an exception that if it's thrown, you don't care about, you just want to let it bubble up and not be reported in static analysis. What the problem is, I think by default, pretty much all exceptions are checked.
boo,
I think there's a couple I think that aren't.
let them bubble. I'm a bubble man myself.
I prefer to catch all exceptions as early as possible
Really?
and handle them explicitly.
Okay.
I like to be explicit about it. If we're in an exceptional state, what should we do to in that case? A lot of times it's just give an error to the user and report it to our Sentry or whatever your error reporting tool is. That's honestly probably 90% of the cases.
Right, that's what I mean, like the top level, like Laravel handler's gonna grab it, throw it,
Frameworks let you be a little bit lazier
Yeah.
with letting things bubble because you know
Right.
that it's gonna do something helpful with it.
Somewhat helpful, but yeah, sometimes though, sometimes you're like, well, in this case, we might like. A good example is in Laravel's model not found exception, when you do first or fail. Sometimes you know, like, okay, this may not return something, I actually want to do something else in that case. And that's a good time where you want to catch the exception and handle it in a certain way. And then there's other, I mean,
Or you just want your 404.
right, and sometimes you just want a 404. But anyway, what we've done is we static analyze our source code and our tests. And I encourage you to also statically analyze your tests because it just kind of helps you write better code overall. And sometimes you just have problems in your tests that anyway, but I don't feel you have to be as strict in your tests. The tests are there to do the testing. So we can actually ignore certain, I don't want to have to annotate every checked exception.
That's what it's doing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is just telling it in our test suite, if we don't catch an exception, that's fine. The test will fail anyways and we'll know.
So you can have a bunch of things that are ignored through the whole project and then
Right.
you can ignore things per
in that
pack.
scope,
Correct.
yeah.
That's cool.
Uh-huh. And there's all sorts of various configuration options you can add to it. You can define what are checked and unchecked exceptions here. So like some of the like illuminate exceptions are called unchecked. I don't remember.
/exception.
Yeah, we use runtime exception as our like if we really just don't care about it, throw a runtime exception.
Okay.
Anyway, there's lots of additional configuration options you can add to PHPStan to make it more strict, less strict, catch certain things or handle different things. I encourage you to look at the documentation for that, read up on the documentation. I don't know, anything else? That stuff. Surprisingly performant, even with like tens of thousands of lines in your project, like you can get a thing back in seconds oftentimes, like a dozen seconds or so, depending on the exact project and complexity.
I have had to disable cache, I feel like, because the cache is like I'd fix some code and it wouldn't recognize it, and I'm
There
like,
was
what was the bug?
probably 6 to 8 months ago, maybe a year ago, there was specific bugs with where there was a caching bug, something to do with the cache, and it would not report I would run it locally and it would pass, but then in CI it would fail because something to do with the cache.
Correct.
As far as I know, that's been fixed and hasn't been issued in forever,
It
so
turned off,
make
so.
sure you're up to date. You've got it up to date. Your PHPStan is up to date. I don't know. Anybody else have any comments on that?
Yeah, we did it. We made it through COVID.
Cool. Well, I think we're probably gonna go hang out, right? Any questions from anyone in the room or on the phone?
Calling from the hotline. Got Janice here, calling from Oklahoma.
Cool. All right, well, any ideas on how we want to handle next month? You want to try it here? You want to try at Chris's place? What?
Augustine's.
Is it further north?
It's downtown, so
Yeah.
it's closer to the old location. I don't know if that's better or worse. This place is actually closer for me, but
Much closer.
Cons.
right.
Let's see how the corners thing goes. Have a good decide.
Okay.
Get the mushroom walnut soup, and you'll have
Soup. It's too hot for soup.
no just a bowl of that and a pasty. Trust me, the mushroom walnut soup is probably the best thing for it.
You get a half a loaf of bread with it anyway.
Cool, thanks for joining us on the call. We'll figure out next meetup and post it as soon as we have details.
If you want to present, let us know.
Yeah, topic ideas, volunteering to present, definitely
I'll do
message
that.
Gordon or I.
I'm to actually have it done before I volunteer this time.
This one, I didn't have anything prepared for this.
And you did an awesome job.
No,
Will Eddie give us a bigger room here if we need it?
Yeah.
We could use the cafeteria if we had enough people.
It's just.
It would have been embarrassing to use.
Yeah. Yeah.
We need at least like 50 people to make that. What's embarrassing about everybody having their own table? It's just.
This room is really nice for what we're doing.
Exactly, we're still.
Yeah.
It's, but there are, I think, a couple bigger meeting rooms within.
Good night.
We're
All right,
still,
where is this place?
2 miles that way, a mile that way.
we're still
Thompson
learning
and
The lay of the land around.